Good morning, friends. Today, it's a rainy, cloudy day, much like yesterday. I think I've looked at the weather. It's going to be like that pretty much for the next week or so. Just cloudy and rainy and not really letting up in that area, which is fine with me. It's fitting for the October month. It's very spooky, but it is also nice to get a little bit of sun, which I feel like we're missing this month. So today, I've been thinking about certain things to talk about, and I think something that should be discussed that I haven't really yet is the concept of astrology. It's one of those things that a lot of people feel very strongly towards, both positively and negatively. And as myself, as a person who walks the middle path, I tend not to regard either of those beliefs as constructive in any sense of the term. When looking at astrology, I sort of got into it about a couple of years ago from noticing that it was pretty accurate in terms of predicting certain events in my life, not to where they are general to the point where this could apply to anyone. They were pretty specific and they were pretty spot on. And as I read like my yearly horoscope for the past couple of years, it felt very relevant in terms of how I felt and things that happened to me. However, going through astrology and getting really in depth with it and reading my daily horoscope every day, I've noticed that there is also a lot of issues with astrology. One of the major ones is not absolutely perfect. It's not going to predict everything in your life. There are a lot of various different influences, both physical, metaphysical. It's not only has to do with your birth chart, it just has to do with the real world and how everything sort of reacts with each other in the physical sense. I will say for those who are skeptics of astrology, we need to understand that the gravitational force of basic planetary activity in our own solar system is affecting us all the time. Plants literally derive energy from the sun. That's an indicator already that there are outside forces giving us energy. The sun is literally fueling us in a physical sense. It's giving us energy very physically. And then we think about the moon, again, which is not the sun. It's not emitting radioactive energy towards us. It's very stable. It's just a big giant rock circling around the world, and yet it affects the tides. It affects even women's menstrual cycles, which is pretty weird, but it happens. Generally women tend to follow the moon cycles, and they're very connected to the moon physically, which is a very interesting thing when you think about it. So in that aspect, these are not things that are disputed amongst scientists. This is just absolute fact that people already know about. So to disregard the concept that the other planets in our solar system are affecting us as well, gravitationally, energetically, whatever you want to call it, is just plain ignorance. These planets are affecting the gravitational pull of the Earth, and they are affecting us as well. They're affecting our psyche, which many people might think is impossible. But if you think about at the core of all planets, usually is some form of metallic object, and there is a magnetic capability that every planet has. The Earth has a magnetic force. It has, the north and south poles. These are magnetic, and these magnetic poles are what protect us from solar flares and other various types of weird space abnormalities. I'm not really familiar with the exact terms, but I know that the magnetic shield surrounding the Earth is what's protecting us, and we can safely say that other planets have that same magnetic field that are affecting human beings on a daily basis, even though they're really far away. Even scientifically, astronomers have observed that Jupiter is actually much like the sun in some degrees, where it is emitting infrared rays. Although it's not considered a star because a star has to be emitting visible light, but visible light, infrared rays are all on the same, the same dynamic of wave patterns. It's just that infrared we can't see, and that's what's exactly happening with Jupiter right now. It emits a certain level of infrared energy because it has, I think it was like an ocean of liquid ionic hydrogen or something, because it's like the gravitational pull is so strong, it like turns it into this weird metallic liquid that's extremely magnetic and energetic and powerful, and it's just, that's what's affecting us every day. And every planet has their own sort of different energetic activity that's going on, whether you want to call it magnetic, electrical, energetic, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that it does have that effect on us. And I think we need to play that into astrology. If we can say that the moon literally affects people's well-being and women's menstrual cycles, that's a very physical thing that it's affecting. We can assume that the other planets are doing similar things, not necessarily the menstrual cycles, but they are affecting our psyche. When it's a full moon, people are a lot more energetic than they usually are, and that's, that has something to say. And I think that the scientific community has ignored that aspect a lot in recent times. So, and I'm going to argue the other side that people have, which they sort of follow astrology in a very ignorant way. I find they sort of want to believe everything that an astrologist says, or what the square decant of Neptune says, and how your life is going to be affected 100%, or this planet is in retrograde and this is that and whatever. These do have effects on us, but to the level of degree that people think they do, I think is very overplayed. I think that there is some room for skepticism in terms of understanding astrology, because it's still a method that's very up for interpretation, and it can be very subjective. And I think a lot of people are falling into these pits of attributing everything to astrology. They're becoming slaves to astrology, so to speak. They ascribe everything in their lives to the way of the planets, which isn't a free way to think. It's not a free way to live. And I see some people like passing judgment on people's signs, right? Like, don't date a Pisces, don't date a Sagittarius. Oh no, stay away from the Aries or whatever. It's like it's a joke, really, when people say things like that, because your astrological sign has no indicator as to how good or bad you are as a person. These people putting out that kind of stuff are basically people who have dated someone in that astrological sign. They happen to be a piece of shit due to genetic factors, due to how they were raised. Not everything has to do with their astrological sign. Their astrological sign is like this very vague guideline that they follow from birth, but everything else is like, most of it is from genetics. Being a Virgo isn't going to determine whether you have lung cancer when you're 75. It's going to be from a lifetime of smoking or getting secondhand smoke from your spouse or whatnot. These aren't, the planets can't control these kinds of things that are very physical. And I think a lot of astrology falls into the trap of like being super specific with terms of actions that are happening in your life. And I think that's very naive way to go about astrology. Astrology is very subtle, and I think it should be understood that way, that you shouldn't really get obsessed with these astrological signs. Don't get obsessed with, oh, Mercury's in retrograde again, chaos is going to happen. It's like, no, I mean, it might, the Mercury might have a core of some kind of metal. We don't really know. It has a magnetic pull, and when it's in retrograde, it kind of like has this weird gravitational pull that affects with the electronic components in our day-to-day lives very subtly. not very noticeably. And that might be the scientific explanation towards it, which I think is a fairly practical assumption to make, since the moon can affect the tides, as I've said many times before. So anyway, those are my thoughts on astrology, and I hope you have a clearer understanding of it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.